Hi. So I saw something this morning, which was people asking, what is dyskinesia and what is dystonia? And I thought I would make a tiny little video to just explain how I would, if I was talking to someone in a clinic, this is what I would say. I'm just loving the fact I've just noticed that there's a light bulb above my head, like a big idea. um, so actually what I try to do is put things into Mary language, which is reasonably simple. When you go to the doctor, often you'll say, I have these symptoms. And what comes back to you is the symptoms that you have said translated into Latin, said back to you. So, for example, anything that's inflamed, we call it itis. If something's inflamed, it's itis. So if you go and say, it could be tonsillitis, or if you go, sore bit. I've got a sore bit just here on my elbow, doctor. See, it's this tendon. Oh, you've got tendonitis. And it sounds very grand, but actually all that's happened is you've said, and what in patients' words are very powerful. Anybody, if you describe what's in your body, it effectively tells somebody what's going on, doesn't it? So often the words are just translated into a different language and said back to you. So it sounds all very scary. The words dyskinesia and dystonia sounds woo, but actually anything that's dys, if you think about words that are dys, not dis as in disco, that's something different, but dys like dyslexic, dyspraxic, dysfunctional, anything that's dys is a bit wonky. And then the other part of the word, kinesiology, is the study of movement. So dys of movement is like a disorder of movement. Ooh, we're nearly up to movement disorder, aren't we? So any sort of movements that are just a bit wonky would be your dyskinesia. So it might be a little bit too much movement. But sometimes it's a movement that you wouldn't expect. So normally, if I go extreme with this, normally if you're walking, you have to go forwards, but there might be something that happens on the side. So it's nothing complicated. It's a wonky of movement. So dyskinesia, it sounds really, really complicated, but that's all we're really saying. And the same with tone. So dystonias. If I don't have any tone in my body, tone is the resting tension in my muscles. So if I don't have any tone in my body at all, I just sort of collapse on the floor in a squishy heap, I have tone to hold myself up against gravity. And if you look at members of your family and people you know, there are some people who are like this. They're ballet dancers and they have tone. Boy, do they have tone. There's a range, you see. Some people really have tone and they're quite posturally erect. And then there are other people that are constantly looking for a bar to lean on, And as you look, there'll be people that you know that are constantly leaning on things because naturally they have quite a low tone. Dystonia is, let's go with the wonky tone. It's not quite what you would expect. So people with dystonia will often get an extra tightening of a muscle, usually or regularly in the feet. So they might get a clenching of the toes. Or some people get a tightness in their neck. Some people get a tightness in their body that they feel is pulling them. But there is a range of tone. There's a range there's a normal range, and then there's one or two things that happen that are a little bit out of the normal. But I think if you just think of it like that, it's just a bit of a wonky movement or a bit of a wonky in the tone, then it's less frightening than feeling like you have this condition that's dystonia, that's something that you can't really get a handle on. So that's how I think of it. when I'm trying to describe it. And when I'm thinking of it, I just think about the whole spectrum of normal along the tone levels. And then when somebody's just a little bit more than that or a little bit less than that, we then use words like hyper, which is more tone, and hypotonia. So, and hyper and hypo are words we use again. It's something else that you use in normal language. Hyper, someone's hyperactive, a little bit more active. So I'm just looking at a normal spectrum and then looking for bits that are very slightly more or very slightly less in terms of tone. So I've waffled a little bit, I'm afraid. I'm sorry about that. These aren't easy concepts, but it helps to think of them more simply. It helps me to think of it more simply.